Rejected on a blind date, how an unexpected waitress's touching act transformed a millionaire's life. Jack Harris stared down at his untouched plate of dry chicken and wilted asparagus. Just another blind date gone wrong. He was a man used to success, a millionaire corporate executive who commanded boardrooms, yet there he sat in the crowded Manhattan restaurant feeling like a fool. The glamorous socialite across from him had barely concealed her contempt, her disdain palpable as she flicked her hair and excused herself without so much as a goodbye. Rejection stung, sharper than anything he had ever felt in his polished life. The laughter around him twisted like a knife through his gut. He ventured outside, the late autumn air as chilly as the silence that engulfed him. He needed to escape, to find solace from the glaring truth of his isolation. The hum of the world outside twisted inwards, and soon he found himself at Lucy's Diner, a little hole in the wall that smelled of frying bacon and fresh coffee. It was the kind of place where dreams simmered over griddles and the chatter of locals filled the air, creating the warmth he desperately craved. He settled into a booth, arms crossed, staring at his half-empty cup of coffee as if it held the answers to his life. As the waitress approached, he noticed a spark in her eye, different from the flattery he was used to. She wore her apron with the same pride she wore her messy bun, an ode to life's imperfection. "You look like you could use a refill," she said with an ease that caught him off guard. "Want something to eat?" "Just coffee," Jack muttered, still caught up in his swirling thoughts, his wealth, his accolades, but mostly the piercing loneliness that haunted him. Her name tag read Mia, and as she poured the steaming liquid, she began to share her story between orders. The long hours, the sick mother, and her dreams of becoming a painter, showcasing her art in galleries. She stood among the patrons, no pretense or airs, simply genuine. Jack found himself entranced, not by her beauty, but by her authenticity. For the first time in years, he felt something stir beneath the haze of his carefully curated life. But that spark ignited a sudden influx of dread. In his gut he felt the weight of the news he'd received earlier that same day. A plan to demolish this very diner, to replace it with a luxury high-rise that breathed the essence of everything he had built his life around. Greed, ambition, the pursuit of more. He leaned back in the booth, tension coiling in his muscles as the struggle in his mind intensified. Here was Mia, full of potential, a reminder of dreams he had pushed to the side in the name of success. And here was his corporate world, waiting to harden him further, to leave behind nothing but a void. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As locals began to gather in murmured discussion about the diner and its significance, Jack felt his heart race with despair. He glanced over at Mia, her passion apparent, urging him to join in, to stand against the tide of corporate greed. He could feel the tug-of-war inside him, the man he'd become versus the man he longed to be. With his phone buzzing ominously in his pocket, a message from his boss threatening dire consequences, he stood on the precipice of a decision. What if he opened his mouth, spoke up for the diner, for Mia? Would he turn his back on a life defined by power, a life that left him so profoundly lonely? As voices rose and the atmosphere thickened, Jack felt a shuddering realization wash over him. The room grew still, but his mind raced. One choice could splinter his world apart, while the other would keep him shackled in chains of success he hardly wanted. The room buzzed, anticipation building, as he stared into the hopeful eyes of the waitress, who had unwittingly sparked a flicker of hope in his troubled soul. Would he let it slip away? With a leap of faith, Jack pushed against the booth and stood. The chorus of chatter and clinking silverware dimmed, sharpening his focus. Here was Mia, a representation of resilience and ambition, clutching onto a dream, while he found himself toying with his own shattered ideals. He opened his mouth, the urge to speak forming words he had never allowed himself to utter in the high-stakes world of corporate maneuvering. "Wait!" The exclamation escaped before he could seize it back. Mia turned, her brow quirked in subdued curiosity. His heart pounded, each beat urging him to seize this moment. This diner. It matters. It's not just a building. Suddenly Jack was overwhelmed by a surge of emotion, raw and unfiltered. What had he let slip through his fingers in pursuit of faceless wealth? Murmurs around him rose again, unfamiliar faces peering with expectation. A dagger of uncertainty pierced him. What if his voice faltered? Yet another acknowledgement of a failing architect of dreams and desires. But this wasn't about him. It was about lifting the voices of those who had sacrificed their own aspirations on the altar of corporate greed. He squared his shoulders, steadying himself against the chill of doubt. Lucy's Diner isn't another piece of real estate to be tucked into the portfolio of a cold corporation. It's a community. The conviction planted in his chest reverberated with fervor. It's where people come together, share dreams, and find warmth when the world turns bitter. There was a moment of silence, a fragile stillness weaving through the diner. Mia's eyes shimmered with a mix of surprise and pride, encouraging him with a nod. "What are you doing?" his inner critic hissed, a familiar ghost whispering doubts of professional disaster. Thoughts of rejection, job loss, and shame closed in. But in that fleeting instant, the realization crystallized. He was done living a life dictated by seamless perfection and fear. "I'm standing up for something worth fighting for," Jack projected, rallying the surrounding patrons who were now shifting in their seats, intrigued by the collision of their own quiet despair and his unexpected audacity. The barista, an older man who'd been working there for over a decade, cleared his throat. "You should know the owner has been struggling for a while. We can't let them close this place." Her voice echoed in support, resonating with others who shared glances of understanding and camaraderie. Jack's heart swelled. Each provided word encouraged him to forge ahead. "Let's create a petition. Fight for this diner, for everyone's dreams that resided within its walls. If I have the resources, I can help." A familiar vibration interrupted him. The notification from his boss turned cold at the back of his mind. But as the laugh lines of worn faces around him tightened with anticipation, he knew he had a choice. The threads of his corporate identity and personal longing were weaving into a new tapestry. For the first time, Jack felt anchored to something greater than himself, his professional prowess becoming a tool for genuine human connection, rather than a gilded cage. He leaned closer to Mia, vulnerable, yet fortified, and locked eyes with her. "If we fight together, we might just win. What do you say?" Her gaze sparkled with a mixture of hope and a pinch of disbelief, a reaction that stoked the fire of conviction inside him. "Yes, let's do it," she exclaimed, her voice crystallizing the moment into a tangible reality. The diner erupted in energy, patrons exchanging nods and murmurs of agreement. Jack felt adrenaline spike through him, a rush of camaraderie enveloping them all. Would he truly expose himself to the harsh realities of a world he once navigated with such calculated indifference? Strikingly, the tremor of fear was overshadowed by a sense of exhilaration, but as his resolve took flight, fragments of doubt clung to the edges of his consciousness. Jack had ignited something powerful, a rebellion against an impersonal system. But was he prepared to face the repercussions from the corporate giants that ruled his past? The stakes rose higher as he committed to a course that diverged sharply from everything he had embraced. The moment was dawning, but uncertainty loomed just as insistently. Would he truly step into the storm, beyond the sparkle of his former life? Would it forge a deal with success, or beckon chaos? As voices rallied, his heart raced with anticipation and dread. One thing was clear. Each choice now held the weight of his identity, and the invisible threads of consequence began to weave themselves tighter, leading him down a path he had never dared to explore. The time had come to face the looming specter of his own past, and the consequences of his newfound resolve. Emotions simmered within Jack as he took in the vibrant energy of the diner, each voice a reminder of the many people who relied on this cherished space. It was exhilarating and terrifying, two opposing forces that swirled inside him. Standing there, he had crossed a threshold. one that separated the old Jack, the one who secured deals in cavernous conference rooms, from the new Jack, who was ready to fight for something meaningful. Mia beside him exuded an infectious enthusiasm, a stark contrast to the well-rehearsed attachment he had honed in his corporate life. Their eyes locked again, and an understanding unfolded between them. This was not just about saving Lucy's diner, it was about reclaiming purpose. "Does anyone have any suggestions on how to start?" Mia's voice sliced through the whirlwind of his thoughts, a practical question, yet it ignited a spark of inspiration within Jack. The hunger for action instead of just words clamored in his mind, pushing him to embrace the chaos. "Let's draft a petition right now," he proposed, his heart racing at the thought of mobilizing their collective voices. A wave of agreement swept through the diner, breaking through the espresso-stained surfaces of their everyday lives. With a pen pilfered from the counter, Jack began scrawling the first few lines, feeling both exhilarated and inadequate. He was an architect of buildings, not hopes. How could he channel this momentum into something tangible? As he wrote, he glanced at the faces around him. Each wrinkle, each set of eyes told a story of perseverance, of dreams deferred. He realized their struggles mirrored his own, a clamor for meaning amid a backdrop of indifference. The cognitive dissonance of his past lifestyle weighed heavily, and he questioned how he had gone so long without acknowledgement of the impact he could have on people's lives. "Here's the first draft," he declared, passing the hastily penned petition to Mia. She read aloud, her voice steady, building upon his initial structure, giving it clarity. With each line, it transformed into a beacon of their shared vision. Other patrons began contributing ideas, their voices booming with newfound conviction. Once the first draft was complete, an unanticipated sense of camaraderie enveloped them. But in the flickering glow of exhilaration, Jack's internal critic loomed, taunting him with the potential risks. What if this illicit diversion from his corporate obligations led to his downfall? What if his connections turned on him for showing weakness? The pressures of his previous life clawed at him, threatening to extinguish the flame that had just been ignited. "Let's make this real," Mia said, her excitement palpable but her eyes attentive to his trepidation. "I know we can do this, but we need to gather as many signatures as possible. We'll need to plan, set up a booth outside." "Outside the diner?" he questioned, the thought of approaching strangers hanging thick in the air. The vulnerability of standing in public exposure felt like standing naked before judgment, an adrenaline rush of dread and thrill all at once. "Yes, people rally around things they care about." Mia's gaze was unyielding. "We're making a stand for something that matters. Let's bring this to life." Jack took a deep breath, the challenging weight of his uncertainty juxtaposed against the intoxicating thrill of hope. This was a decisive moment, a chance to align his past capabilities with an emerging identity. But was he ready to expose his true self and face the backlash that could come from his corporate world? As they strategized, each decision unfolded like a piece of a larger puzzle, allowing Jack to see an unfamiliar side of him, one willing to gamble on something meaningful. Yet, amidst the excitement, he felt the encroaching sense of impending consequences. Looming questions clung to him. How far was he willing to go? Would he risk everything he had built for what could easily slip through his fingers? Answering that would demand more from him than he had foreseen. It required facing the complexities he had long avoided. Mia's voice pierced through the haze of doubt. "Are you with me, Jack? This is our shot at something real." The echo of her words faded into the background as the future unfolded in front of him, heavy with trepidation yet saturated with possibility. In that moment, he understood the stakes were higher than he had ever anticipated. The decision loomed large, to fully embrace this unexpected journey or retreat into the comfortable shadows of his past. He swallowed hard, commitment rushing through him, an electric force that compelled him forward. The truth was dawning, but so was the reality of confrontation with a world that might not welcome his emergence. And in that instant of clarity, he realized that in embracing this new fight, he had unwittingly set into motion the unwinding of his past self. But at what cost? Jack leaned against the diner's counter, his heart a symphony of uncertainty and resolve. As Mia laid out a clear plan, the cacophony of the diner played in stark contrast to the tumult inside him. Each person who walked through the door represented risk and reward. Their hopes infused the air, thickening the atmosphere with urgency. And yet, Jack felt an immovable weight, dragging him back. "Okay, here's what we'll do," Mia said enthusiastically. "We'll set up outside tomorrow, get some signs made, something eye-catching. We can make it festive, draw people in." Her excitement was palpable, yet Jack's mind spiraled with consequences. The looming question nagged at his core. Would his decision to engage in this public campaign trigger the repercussions he feared? He wasn't just jeopardizing his budding connection with Mia. He risked tangling his world of responsibilities into a chaotic mess. The thought paralyzed him and ignited a flame of determination. "That sounds effective," he finally replied, forcing a note of confidence. "But we should be prepared for backlash. I can't afford to alienate anyone from my business connections. They won't look kindly on this." "Fine," Mia lightly chuckled as if he had just made a casual joke. "But let me remind you that this is about more than your connections. This is about people, Jack." She locked eyes with him, a challenge masked under her supportive gaze. "And you should know that even corporate titans have hearts. You're not just a guy in a suit anymore." The thought resonated within Jack, pulling at his facade. He knew that she was right, yet found himself reluctant to fully embrace this truth. Pulling away from his thoughts, he turned back to the paper, the petition sprawled across its surface, a tangible representation of their emerging mission. As he revised the petition's language, his mind wandered to previous negotiations, sterile boardrooms where emotion was a weakness. A sense of longing surged. What if he chose passion over perks? For the first time, he was engaging with the raw essence of life, the messy emotions, shared struggles, and the beauty of vulnerability. This fight wasn't just for Lucy's diner, it was a fight for his right to feel deeply without fear, to step into a world where he didn't merely exist but thrived. "Let's make our presence known," he declared suddenly, surprising himself with the fervor in his voice. "We can turn this into something that people will talk about, like a movement." "And that's the spirit I'm talking about," Mia remarked, her encouragement effervescent. "But you'll need to take the lead, Jack. People are looking for inspiration. You have the vision. Now it's time to act on it." The responsibility weighed heavily on him. Could he, an architect accustomed to the solitude of his design work, become a rallying point? He felt the air shift slightly, as if the diner itself breathed more deeply in response to his words. "What if I don't know how?" The honest admission slipped from him before he could rein it back. "You'll learn. Just like building something, it takes transformation, practice, and sometimes you have to create something on shaky ground." Her assurance ignited something deep within him, a flicker of hope brightening the edges of doubt. Perhaps this era of courage and commitment could fuel indelible change, both in the diner and in his own life. As ideas popped into his mind about potential partnerships, outreach strategies, and promotional efforts, he realized his skills as an architect could be applied differently here. No longer would he simply map structures. He could architect dreams, build connections, and design collective action grounded in community love. With new resolve, Jack seized paper and pen, driven by a fresh surge of purpose. But just as he began drafting promotional ideas for public outreach, a distinct sound echoed outside, a sharp honk followed by the murmur of impatience. The world outside was voicing its expectations, and the reality of his decision solidified. Standing on the edge of uncertainty, Jack grasped the pen tighter, feeling the weight of his choice. He was no longer just a gathering point for ideas. He was sprinting toward a culmination of potential that now haunted him with moral implications. Would he truly dig in deep enough, risk everything he had built, and create something meaningful that would reshape his existence? As he contemplated these truths, doubt nibbled at his confidence. Tomorrow would be pivotal, but first he had to confront the gnawing fear that gripped him. The stakes were rising, and he was teetering on the edge between two worlds. The life of safety he had lived, and the unpredictably vibrant existence he was striving to forge. All at once, uncertainty swept over him. Would his newfound path result in the liberation he sought, or swallow him whole? As he drafted those words, he felt something awaken deep inside. With choices ahead of him, Jack realized he was about to step into a narrative far beyond his own, where the next moment could either unveil bright possibilities or unearth shadows from his past that he was not yet ready to face. Jack awoke the next morning, an inevitable knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. Today was not just another day. It was the day where he would stand tall, or falter. As he paced his small apartment, the gravity of his commitment hung over him like a storm cloud, promising uncertainty and the potential for backlash. He poured himself a cup of coffee, allowing the steamy aroma to fill the kitchen, yet it offered little comfort. Instead, it gave him moments of reflection, thoughts ricocheting between feelings of doubt and flickers of determination. How could someone like him, a man built on structures and systems, actually draw people with words and emotions? He could build a skyscraper, but this required a different type of vulnerability. With 3 hours left before his scheduled outreach at the diner, Jack tapped into moments of focus, channeling his nervous energy into finalizing the plans he'd sketched on paper. His workspace quickly evolved into a whirlwind of visuals, ideas for signs, slogans that could inspire, and ways to engage the community. Each concept shimmered with ambition, yet the lingering fear gnawed at him. He recalled Mia's unwavering belief in him. Just like building something. Her words echoed in the back of his mind. Perhaps he could construct this initiative as he would a building, lay down strong foundations and steadily erect walls that would support both the ideas and emotions tangled within this fight for Lucy's diner. As he dug deeper into his thoughts, an unexpected revelation surfaced. In the architectural world, he had learned to read people's needs through their preferences, desires, and experiences. This outreach was no different. He wasn't merely gathering signatures. He was crafting a narrative designed to resonate with those he sought to help. Jack felt a jolt of excitement pulse through him, the kind he hadn't felt in years. It cracked open a motivation steeped firmly in purpose. The thought shattered his previous constraints, and he grabbed the pen with renewed ferocity, jotting down elements that connected to deeper human experiences: family, belonging, nostalgia. However, just as the ink started flowing, every positive thought collided with a jarring reminder of the corporate world outside. The thought of his colleagues' disdain and jeering conversations momentarily dulled his rekindled spirit. What if they saw this act as reckless? Would they still regard him as the professional he'd worked tirelessly to become? Pushing those reminders aside, he focused on the diner's essence. It was about more than business. It was about bridging connections, creating a sense of home in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. The weight of his choices cocooned him in both fear and empowerment. This was unfamiliar territory, an invitation to step beyond the polished image he had meticulously crafted. His mind whirled with how to approach Mia this morning. She had set the course. Now it was his turn to fuel the fire. Encouraging others required sincere engagement, and he'd have to break down his own defenses. He needed to unravel the suit that had confined him and expose the part of himself that thrived in raw life experiences. Determined, he straightened his spine and fortified himself for the day ahead. Steeling his resolve, Jack brushed his hands through his hair and slid into a button-down shirt that felt stifling compared to the freedom he craved. As he made his way to Lucy's diner, thoughts of possibility swirled with that lingering doubt, constructing barriers of hesitance. Was he truly ready to embrace the complexities of community engagement, or would he find himself knee-deep in a predictable professional identity that left no space for growth? He entered the diner, the familiar scent of bacon and brewed coffee wrapping around him like a warm hug. Yet, even here, the buzz of everyday life carried whispers of trepidation. The eyes of patrons shifted toward him, brimming with unspoken expectations. "Jack," Mia called out, her smile radiant and infectious, an anchor amidst the turmoil shifting inside him. "Let's do this," he replied. And as the words escaped, he realized that this engagement was not just about the diner. It was about seizing life, the essence of living it fully. Was he ready to uncover the layers beneath his carefully constructed persona? Today, he would finally confront not just the public reception, but the competing narratives within himself as well. With Mia by his side, it was time to face what came next. But lurking in the depth of his mind was a question that lingered. Would he emerge as the architect of his destiny, or would the day's complexities send him spiraling back into the confines of his past? The fluorescent lights of the diner flickered slightly as Jack took a deep breath, eyeing the patrons around him. Mia was already moving through the tables with ease, her presence buoyant and welcoming. Yet Jack felt the anchor of doubt still tethering him to the floor. This wasn't merely a mundane outreach. It was a moment of truth, a chance to redefine the man he had become through years of corporate structure. What he would soon channel wasn't just his professional skills. It was a raw, unfiltered version of himself, willing to embrace all the uncertain complexities of humanity. "All right, let's get started," he murmured under his breath, reminding himself this was his chance. These people weren't just diners. They were his audience, his potential allies in a campaign that transcended profit margins and quarterly reports. They were human beings tied to Lucy's diner, reflecting on their lives, memories, and dreams. Mia appeared beside him, her enthusiasm palpable. "Let's start with a table leaderboard for the signatures. Get the patrons to raise their hands if they want to support Lucy's." She beamed, her energy infectious. Jack nodded, muscles unwinding a little. Together they constructed a makeshift goal, exhibiting wildly colorful papers bearing their slogan across the diner's humble walls. He could feel the atmosphere shifting. Tension started to ease. Laughter bubbled occasionally, and conversations emerged from the din of the diner's clattering utensils. As Jack moved from table to table, he found himself increasingly emboldened. He asked questions and listened intently, as patrons shared why Lucy's mattered to them. There were stories of anniversaries celebrated, milestones marked, and the comforting smells of breakfast that brought them back to childhood. Each tale slipped in smoothly, merging into the shared tapestry of his own cravings for connection beyond corporate confines. But the reality of potential rejection loomed sharp in the back of his mind. A woman sitting alone caught his eye, a serious expression stamped on her face as she stared absently at her coffee. Jack approached cautiously, noticing she had yet to lift her gaze towards the fun unfolding around her. "Hi there, I'm Jack," he began, his voice stable, despite the inner turmoil brewing. "What brings you to the diner today?" Her gaze remained steady on her cup. "Nothing special. Just here for some coffee. I don't think Lucy's will survive, honestly." The weight of her words landed like a thunderclap. Jack didn't flinch. "It sounds like this place means something to you. What if you shared with me why you feel that way?" The woman's eyes sparkled with surprise, but as she began to open up about her history with the diner, Jack felt a spark ignite within him. All she needed was an opportunity to be heard, to be acknowledged. That was the essence he had been searching for, the art of connection rooted in authenticity. A few more tables later, and Jack found his rhythm. The signatures began to pile up, their commitment transformed into tangible encouragement. He felt a shift within himself, moving past fear as he discovered a hidden talent for storytelling. He wove together the accounts he'd gathered into compelling narratives, highlighting not just the necessity of saving the diner, but also the crucial role it played in shaping their community's identity. Mia watched from a distance, the pride illuminating her face. Jack sensed her gaze and met it head-on, sharing a victorious smile as he connected the experiences in the room to their combined mission. But as he returned to the sudden quietness of his thoughts, second guesses bubbled back up. Would the momentum hold? Would they be hailed after this outreach, or chastised for broaching something believed to be futile? What tyrant of doubt would rise to silence the harmony they had created? When the clock struck 10, they had amassed a wall covered in signatures, but the day was far from over. Jack stood before the banner they had crafted, feeling its weight pressing against his shoulders but equally supporting him with every marked name and commitment. Today was just the beginning, he thought, an exhilarating rush coursing through him, illuminating a path he hadn't set foot upon until now. In this newfound terrain, he craved even deeper engagement. a willingness to open himself up not just as a professional, but as a human being craving vulnerability. Mia shifted beside him, her excitement infectious. "What's next, Jack?" she asked inquisitively, her eyes sparkling with possibility. Jack's heart raced. He had to choose. The whispers of doubt flickered around him like shadows, yet the embers of hope flickered brighter. This was not just about Lucy's diner anymore. It was about redefining everything he thought he knew about himself. The time had come to face a crucial decision. Would he take the risk to unearth even deeper connections, or would he retreat to the comfort of his past? With trepidation mingling with excitement, Jack inhaled, ready to confront the tumultuous wave of his own aspirations. What lay beyond was both terrifying and exhilarating, teetering at the edge of a revelation about who he was meant to be. The world outside the diner faded into a distant hum as Jack pondered Mia's question. Each signature adorned on the wall was a spark, but he sought more than a temporary flame. He craved a fire that would ignite lasting change. Yet to embrace that process demanded vulnerability, a concept he had shielded himself from for years in the corporate spheres of his life. Jack felt the weight of his own expectations pressing down on him like heavy chains. Could he truly transcend the boundaries he had constructed? He wrestled with the potential fallout of his ambition. What if he failed? "Let's take the energy we've built here and push it further," Jack finally declared, echoing a resolve that coursed through him. It took him by surprise. He felt buoyed by the notion that perhaps he was more than just a cog in a corporate wheel. This was a moment to challenge himself, not as an employee or a manager, but as a human being. Mia's eyes lit up and she clapped her hands together. "Absolutely, let's think bigger. What if we hosted a community gathering here? We could invite everyone to share their stories, maybe even have some local entertainment." The idea bore the swell of excitement and terror in equal measure. Jack's mind darted between enthusiasm and apprehension, wrestling with the implications of such an undertaking. Hosting a gathering meant risking vulnerability on a grand scale, but it also meant opening the door for deeper connections and reiterating Lucy's importance to the community. "Are we ready for something like that?" he questioned out loud, his voice more tentative than he intended. "Of course we are. Everyone's invested in this. They love Lucy's. They'll want to come together," Mia replied, her positive tone infectious. The lingering doubt in Jack's mind took shape as he considered the possibility of failure. What if this was just wishful thinking? What if the community turned away, deeming it a fruitless effort? The shadows of self-doubt crept back, whispering reminders of his prior limitations. No, he reprimanded himself, the thought stinging with disdain. This was the time to choose growth over comfort. He had seen firsthand how eager everyone was to share their connection to Lucy's diner. Maybe those intimate conversations could bloom into something larger, a chance for the diner to stand as more than just a place to eat. As they sketched the broad outline of the event, Jack began to craft a narrative in his mind, a theme that would weave through the evening, uniting the patrons in their shared love for the diner. He envisioned a tapestry of voices and stories coming to life, the echo of laughter mingling with the scent of freshly brewed coffee, and the thrill of vulnerability enveloping everyone in attendance. Mia leaned in closer, eyes full of anticipation. "We could create a stage by the window. We can set up an open mic for anyone who wants to speak." She was truly alive with purpose. Jack took a deep breath, realizing they were building something meaningful. With Mia's infectious spirit and his cultivation of stories, a dynamic event was possible. It could become a conduit for a profound change. His momentum solidified. He began making lists, items needed for the event, potential guest speakers, outreach to local musicians, promotions. Every moment spent in preparation pulsed with energy, igniting a fire within Jack that he hadn't felt in years. But beneath the surface, an undercurrent of fear bubbled. The doubts screamed, what if no one came? What if he faltered in the execution and let everyone down? The pressure began to mount as he juggled orchestrating the gathering alongside his growing connection to each person he had met. Despite this, Jack felt invigorated, holding on to the idea that this wasn't merely an event. It embodied his transformation. It wasn't about the diner anymore. It was a reflection of his own evolving core. a commitment to embracing authenticity and connection. As he and Mia delved deeper into planning, each step forward revitalized him. He organized the logistics and began to envision the night as a celebration of resilience and community spirit. This was the moment to embrace who he had become, a narrative expanding beyond fear. But even as his excitement soared, questions loomed larger than ever. Could he sustain this new path? Would the diners reciprocate his authenticity? Or were they merely humoring an idealistic dreamer? With the event set for next week, Jack faced an unsettling truth. This leap into vulnerability had the potential for either triumph or disaster. As the final notes of their planning session lingered, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The moment arrived to confront the mayhem of his own aspirations and uncertainties, and he realized he couldn't turn back now. Where this journey would ultimately lead, Jack did not know, but he was no longer paralyzed by hesitation. Instead, he was propelled by a driving need to connect, a spark of courage igniting his resolve. As he glanced around, he could almost feel the warmth of the community surrounding him. They would share the weight of both success and failure together. As the door swung open, bringing in the late-night breeze, Jack felt that next step beckoning him, one that could define him on this fresh path. What if he learned more about himself than he ever dared to imagine? What would an evening spent unraveling their collective threads reveal? Jack's anticipation grew as the days counted down toward the gathering at Lucy's diner. Each morning brought fresh waves of uncertainty, underscoring the importance of this evening not only for others, but for him as well. The diner, a cornerstone of the community, symbolized his burgeoning journey toward authenticity and connection. Yet, with each passing hour, doubt gnawed at him. What if he stumbled in front of everyone? What if his vulnerability only served as a prelude to humiliation? As the day of the event arrived, Jack stood at the diner's threshold, the familiar bell jingling against the backdrop of a busy street. He had spent the previous nights immersed in preparations, yet the overriding emotion swirling inside him was a blend of excitement and dread. He imagined the crowd, those eager faces he'd come to know, and wondered if they would respond to his vision. Would they embrace the openness he sought to cultivate, or would they shy away, leaving him exposed? Inside the diner, sunlight streamed in, illuminating the space with a warm glow. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of baked goods, creating an inviting atmosphere. Jack stepped in and began aligning chairs, ensuring everything was arranged not just for comfort but for connection. Each chair positioned symbolized an invitation, an opportunity for someone to share, to speak, to unveil their stories. Yet as he prepared, doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering that his efforts would lead to nothing. Mia busied herself with final touches, stringing fairy lights overhead to set a calming ambiance. "You ready for this, Jack?" she called out, sensing his hesitation. "Yeah, just nervous, I guess," he admitted, confronting his discomfort. "What if they don't show? Or what if I bomb this whole thing?" Mia looked at him, her gaze steady. "This isn't about you failing or succeeding. This is about creating a space for all of us. You're giving them something they need, even if you can't see it yet." Her words anchored him momentarily, yet as the hours ticked closer to the start, he found himself retreating into a cocoon of self-doubt. The diner saw its usual patrons trickle in, laughter and chatter mingling as familiar faces greeted one another. Jack noticed them, each interaction ranging from cordial to animated, and it dawned on him that he didn't just belong to this community, he had a role within it. Feeling the weight of the impending gathering, he glanced at the empty stage by the window. A palpable silence settled around him. Returning to his writing, he penned out the narrative he envisioned for the evening, focusing on the theme of transformation, not just personal but community-wide. He needed to find a way to interweave his journey with theirs, bridging vulnerabilities. As he practiced speaking aloud, trying to claim the authority of his voice, he still grappled with the sense that something was amiss within him, an unsettled knot of fear. It was as if he stood before a mirror, seeing himself reflected through the lens of his aspirations. But the image flickered, taunting him with unresolved tension. By the time the clock crept into the evening hours, the diner was abuzz with anticipation, filled with those who had come out to support their haven. Each face represented a heartbeat of the diner's essence, and at that moment, Jack recognized that they echoed his own struggles and triumphs. He reached out to grab the microphone, heart thundering in his chest. Jack stood there, breath hitching as he prepared to step beyond his old boundaries. Amidst the warm glow of the fairy lights, he could almost feel the stories waiting to be unveiled, their energy igniting a spark within him. This wasn't solely his moment anymore. It was a tapestry of lives interwoven with his own. As he took a breath, feeling both weight and buoyancy, he was struck by the deep realization that connection was a two-way street, and that very vulnerability he had feared might also illuminate a path forward in the dark labyrinth of human experience. He reached for the microphone, uncertainty still lying beneath the surface but tempered by renewed determination. The crowd quieted in anticipation, all eyes on him as he prepared to speak words that would define this pivotal shift. "Welcome, everyone," he began, feeling the tremor of his voice resonate in the hushed atmosphere, unaware of the next act that would change everything. What would he discover about himself when those stories began to flow? Would he find the courage he sought, or would he remain lost in his doubts? As the words left his lips, a silence enveloped the room, its weight pressing down on Jack like a heavy blanket. Each gaze fixed on him felt both like a warm embrace and a suffocating scrutiny, amplifying his pulse as he fought against the familiar tide of self-doubt. He looked out at the sea of faces, friends, some acquaintances, and a few strangers, each person carrying their own stories, fears, and hopes into this shared space. This moment was no longer just about him. It was a collective exploration of vulnerability. "Tonight," he began, his voice gaining strength, "isn't just about what I have to say. It's about what we can share together." He could feel the tremors subsiding as he embraced the notion of vulnerability as a bridge rather than a burden. Jack's initial words were shaky, but as he delved into his own journey, his struggles with self-doubt and the quest for authenticity, he could see people nodding, their expressions shifting from tentative curiosity to genuine connection. Each story he shared was like a thread woven into a greater fabric shared by all. He spoke of missed opportunities due to fear, moments when silence overshadowed his needs, and how, for too long, he wore a mask that suffocated his true self. As he continued, Jack became increasingly aware of the emotional cadence of the room. Laughter burst forth at his humorous missteps, while poignant silence underscored the more serious reflections. It was an unexpected but welcome dialogue. He wasn't just speaking into the void, he was creating a tapestry of connection. When he invited the audience to share their own moments of transformation, a ripple of anticipation surged through the diner. A shadow of apprehension flickered in his chest. What if the room fell silent? Would they step forward or stay hidden? Yet, the collective breath that followed was filled with an eagerness he had not anticipated. One by one, people began to share. A harried mother spoke about tackling her fear of failure to pursue her passion. A young man discussed overcoming his insecurities in a new job. As voices filled the space, Jack felt a swell of empowerment surge through him. By stepping beyond his own fears, he had created room for others to do the same. He realized that his journey toward authenticity was also about facilitating others' transformations. For every story shared, he felt fragments of his own insecurities dissolve, shedding layers he no longer wished to carry. The act of giving the microphone away became a powerful catalyst for change, not just for those who spoke, but for him as well. As the evening unfolded, Jack's doubts began to fade into the background. Instead, new questions emerged within him. What else might I unlock if I continue to shed my armor? He questioned the notion of what he thought he needed to be versus who he truly was. With every shared story, every laugh and sigh, the barrier that had separated him from the rest of the world felt like it was crumbling. Yet at the peak of this revelation, a sudden hush fell upon the crowd as an unfamiliar face emerged from the back of the room. This newcomer had a grave expression, the kind that demanded attention. The delicate balance of vulnerability began to shift, instilling a new tension in the air. Jack's heart raced again, now laced with curiosity rather than fear. Who was this person that seemed to disrupt the harmonious exchange that had been building? What weight or story did they carry that would transform the dynamic of the evening even further? As this new presence took a step forward, Jack felt the anticipation tingle in the air, ready to pull him into yet another layer of discovery about himself and the people around him. What awaited him next? Would he find answers or an entirely new set of questions? The newcomer, a middle-aged woman, approached with an undeniable gravity that quieted the diners. Jack felt a mix of apprehension and curiosity surge through him. Who was she, and how would her entry shift the mood cultivated from vulnerability? "Excuse me," she began, her voice steady yet edged with raw emotion. I've never felt comfortable sharing in a place like this, and I didn't think I'd find myself here tonight. But I had to come when I heard about it." Jack gestured for her to continue, his heart racing in rhythm with the anticipation of the crowd. As she spoke, the room hung on her every word, captivated by her sincerity. "I lost my husband last year. His favorite place was Lucy's Diner," she recounted, her gaze drifting as if transported back in time. "We came here every Saturday morning for coffee, and he made it a point to chat with the waitress who reminded him of old friends. It was the little things that mattered." Jack felt the sharp pang of empathy strike him. The raw emotion in her voice was a reminder of the deeper impact that places like Lucy's had on individuals beyond mere sustenance. "It's just bricks and mortar, but this place—" She paused, glancing around. "It holds memories. It carries so many stories. In laughter, arguments, love, and grief. When I heard it might close," her voice cracked, "I felt like losing another piece of him." The weight of her truth hung in the air, weaving into the tapestry of stories that had been shared. Jack recognized this as an embodiment of everything they were fighting for, not just a diner, but the very essence of community, a repository of lives intertwined. With newfound clarity, he stood taller, the transformation inside him ignited by her words. "You're so right," he affirmed, feeling the room unify in accord. "It is about more than brick and mortar. It's about memories, legacies, and love. Each of us carries a stake in this place." He turned to face the crowd, emboldened. "This is why our fight matters. We're not just signing a petition. We're preserving our stories. Together, we're building a testament to our shared experiences." The woman smiled through her tears, resonating with the crowd whose tumultuous emotions reflected back the impact of her story. "I'd like to invite every one of you here to share a memory of your own. Let's remember what Lucy's means to us because that's what will fuel this movement," Jack urged, striking a chord of empowerment that flowed through him like electricity. People began to share, each voice layered with emotion. A veteran spoke of reuniting with loved ones. A teenager recounted moments spent with friends after school, and a couple reflected on their first date over coffee. As they spoke, Jack realized transformative change wasn't limited to the space of physical preservation. This was about emotional resonance, collective healing, and shared uplift. With every testimony, Jack felt himself shedding not only layers of corporate facade but also doubt that had lingered far too long. He was an architect, yes, but now he was learning to build bridges through words. By the evening's end, the energy crackled like a live wire, and the boundaries that once confined him began to blur. This night birthed something profound, a tapestry of human connection embroidered through authenticity and shared risk. As diners hugged, exchanged numbers, and reignited memories, Jack felt the duality of his life merge within him, a man of business revealing himself as a man of heart. The diner, Lucy's, was more than a battle to fight. It was a herald for what Jack had now become, a voice for not just his ambitions but for the community that had become his family. In those moments, Jack Harris emerged transformed, proud of his dual identity, recognizing that the tapestry woven from struggles and triumphs marked his evolution toward genuine humanity. As the eager patrons dispersed into the glowing Manhattan night, Jack felt clarity wash over him. The journey was just beginning. He stood at the threshold of new beginnings, fueled by purpose. The diner would be saved, but more importantly, he too had saved himself in the process. Reclaiming dreams and aspirations tucked away beneath layers of ambition, Jack stepped out into the brisk night, the city alive with possibilities. He embraced the transformative power of love and community within walls that had served as boundaries before, but now opened to the infinite horizon of human connection. He had not only awakened his own story, but had become an architect of his destiny, forging pathways toward deeper significance both within and outside himself. In the coming weeks, Jack spearheaded initiatives, gathered community signatures, and engaged city officials with unwavering resolve. The campaign burgeoned into a movement, marking a definitive turning point. "Welcome. What can I get you?" The waitress at Lucy's cheerfully asked a new customer the next day as the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air anew, a reminder of life, connection, and stories still waiting to be shared. And as those stories continued to unfold, Jack knew he had become integral to the diner's narrative, forging a pathway built on authenticity, empathy, and a sense of unshakable purpose. Don't wait another second. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire you. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm. Your support matters more than ever. Comment below with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about Jack's incredible journey. And share this video with at least 5 friends who need that transformational spark in their lives. This is the moment to show your support for stories that resonate.